China has built a complete nuclear system from the ground up. It's a vast change from 1949, when the young nation had very little nuclear power. Officials behind the release of a white paper on nuclear matters say China is #1 worldwide in terms of nuclear power safety operation indicators.
At the core of China's nuclear safety strategy are the 4 emphases. We should put equal emphasis on development and safety, rights and obligations, independent efforts and coordination, and comprehensively promote nuclear safety by eliminating the root causes of risk.
The white paper also says China employs the highest standards in shaping policy and legal framework and making medium and long-term plans to implement its nuclear safety strategy. To ensure independent regulation of nuclear safety, China has strengthened technical support and developed a professional team while modernizing the system.
China exercises unified regulation through a system underpinned by independence, openness, the rule of law, rationality, and effectiveness.
Officials also say China will continue to promote international cooperation in nuclear safety and fulfill its international nuclear obligations.
China says it will not take the blame for the U.S.'s problems with fentanyl abuse, a drug that's driving America's opioid crisis. The Office of the National Narcotics Control Commission claims China is not the major source of fentanyl trafficking to America.
From October 2018 to March of this year, U.S. Customs identified 229 fentanyl smuggling cases with a total weight of about 536 kilograms. Only 17 of the smuggling cases are from China, about 5 kilograms total.
Beijing has tightened regulations and stepped up legislation on fentanyl-related substances in recent years. So far, 25 related substances are listed as controlled narcotics.
We are working closely with the police and customs officials at ports and other locations across the country to make sure no drug trafficking happens under our watch.
Despite China's efforts in fighting fentanyl trafficking, deaths linked to drug abuse in the U.S. remain high. In 2017, over 28,000 Americans died of fentanyl abuse. The number rose to 30,000 last year.
Both countries need to prioritize research on the real reason for fentanyl abuse in the U.S. and are conducting comprehensive measures to reduce the huge demand of fentanyl in the U.S.
The office adds that China remains firmly committed to its zero-tolerance policy on illegal drugs, and the nation stands ready to work with the U.S. and other countries to share intelligence and experience to further tackle drug problems.
UK's Brexit issue has been the main agenda for the UK government for over 3 years, and what will happen to the millions affected by Brexit remains ambiguous. There are several civil campaigns offering solutions.
One initiative was launched by New Europeans, a civil rights organization that supports freedom of movement, non-discrimination, and the principle of solidarity in Europe.
Roger Casali is based in Italy and is the founder of New Europeans, who has also served as a Labour Member of Parliament in the UK. His organization won the Schwarzkopf Foundation Europe Award 2019 for their Brexit initiative. His campaign aims to protect the rights of about 3.4 million EU 27 citizens in the UK and the approximately 1.6 million British citizens who live in the EU.
So we have proposed the idea of a green card, which will be given to each and every one of them. That's 5 million people. Treat them as one group, protect their rights. The green card will be issued by the European Commission in our proposal, and it would ring-fence the rights and the status that they have at the moment as EU citizens living in another EU member state.
Under the current UK settled status scheme, EU citizens that already have residency are allowed to remain indefinitely, unless they leave the UK for 5 years. Casali explains that their proposed green card would create a practical solution to support this program.
There's still some flaws in the settled status scheme, but basically it gives you the right to stay. But what it doesn't do is give you a physical document that you actually need in those day-to-day situations where there may be a misperception A doctor might think that you're Italian, therefore you can't have free medical care anymore. Well, you can if you've got settled status. But if you've got a green card, you can just take out your green card and say, oh, okay, and all the doctor needs to know is that if you've got a green card, that's okay. He can give you free medical care.
Many UK citizens welcome the idea of an EU green card.
Sounds like a great idea for British people. Does it work the same way the other way? If it does, then great, fantastic. I think Brexit's something that's going to be terrible for the UK, and this is a way of mitigating that risk.
It would be absolutely brilliant, because a lot of people like myself travel across Europe. At the moment it's very easy, and we're worried that post-Brexit we're going to have barriers, so it will stop us being able to travel and people being able to travel to work here. So anything that makes that easier has got to be really good.
Have family in Europe, and it's in the past, before the Europe occurred, the new situation, the present situation occurred, it was very difficult to get to see them. I have family in Finland who I'd love to go and see.
With an October 31st deadline approaching for Brexit, millions are concerned of the potential impact it would have on their lives. New Europeans are hoping to get a resolution on the green card passed by the European Parliament and at least offer some relief.
On the night of September 2nd, 2018, an inferno that lasted 4 hours consumed some of the world's most precious artifacts inside Brazil's iconic National Museum. Officials blamed the fire on a short circuit in the air conditioning system, a lack of sprinklers and nearby water hydrants that were dry. Many wondered why there was a systemic lack of funding and neglect.
We just had signed on June 5th the contract that would give us roughly around $4 million for our institution. This is the irony of it all. Now the money arrived after decades where we had absolutely no resources for this kind of investment. It arrives, and the same year the museum completes 200 years, and then the tragedy happened.
Part of that money has been used to cover the roof of what was once a palace that served as residence of the Portuguese royal family in Rio de Janeiro, and then converted into Brazil's National Museum. The devastating fire severely damaged the main building, and most of its collection was reduced to ashes. But since the tragedy, staff are recovering more than expected. Thousands of items have been rescued from the rubble, and there are hopes that with the help from the international community, the museum can be brought back to life. Paleontologist Luciana Carvalho, vice coordinator of the rescue team, led CGTN inside the building. She says the museum will one day reopen.
It is obvious we suffered a huge loss and we need help. For example, the mummies that, even if we recover the bones, is not enough to recover data. But on the other hand, there is the survival of ceramics, rocks, minerals, and fossils. It will take some time for us to reopen to the public, but we will.
Novamente disponível para a população, mas ele vai estar disponível.
The fact left on the main floor was a meteorite weighing more than 5 tons, the largest ever found in Brazil. Also among the recovered items, parts of Luzia, the 12,000-year-old remains of a human skull considered the centerpiece of the museum's collection. Meanwhile, dozens of the museum's staff are cleaning the soot and dusting off fragments found inside the building. It's a delicate job, says archaeologist Cleide Martins.
Here in the lab, we are still not in the phase of restoring these objects. It is a first preventive conservation effort to save and avoid losing parts of the material.
Containers are packed with recovered items. It could take years to finish classifying all the material. Replacing the collection will be impossible without the help of other museums.
We will not be able to rebuild the Natural Museum without their help, because our museum did not only house material from Brazil, we had material from all over the world. And at this point, what we would like is that institutions from all places, including China, consider when we are ready, then that they would make donations of original material.
From the rubble and despair comes hope as more items are recovered. Optimistic officials say the museum is alive and the research continues.